Hey everyone, this is Amanda Moore from the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, and you're listening to the ASF Podcast, the show that explains everything you want to know about Angelman Syndrome. We're so excited you're here, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the ASF Podcast. This is Chloe. I'm guest hosting today for the Angelman Syndrome Foundation. I'm bringing together a group of wonderful siblings and relatives who have found careers in their life that were inspired by their loved one with Angelman Syndrome. Our panel today spans across the world and many different professions, and somehow, somewhere on their journey, they felt a calling to be involved in their communities and with people who they could support because they have a brother, sister, cousin living with Angelman syndrome, and I'm honored to be here with them. I think the sibling perspective is so profound, and a cousin too who adds just how much the beautiful lives of our loved ones with Angelman syndrome can truly inspire us. So I'm going to open up for everyone to introduce themselves. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to hearing your perspectives.
All right. Hi, my name is Michelle Harvey Martin. I am older sister to a 29-year-old brother named Matt with Angelman syndrome in the San Diego, California area. I also happen to be a special education teacher in the San Diego area. I also do some kind of separate work with, I have a behavior analysis certification as well. But have always wanted to just kind of, I've loved being in the classroom. And I currently have I teach 4th and 5th graders. So elementary level, kiddos that need a lot of communication support and behavioral support and functional academics. Kind of anything and everything in terms of special education and living in the kind of disability world. I feel like just as my career choice, that's where I ended up.
Hi, my name is Sarah Jurgensmeyer. I'm big sister to Luke, who's living with Angelman syndrome. I'm based out of Chicago. Luke's in Kansas City, where my family's originally from. I'm a genetic counselor and work at a children's hospital. And I would say for me, as you'll hear through more conversations with myself and the rest of the folks on this awesome panel, I think that my brother's experience and my family's experience in the world of genetics and the power of getting a genetic diagnosis meant so much that it's meant a lot to be able to play that role and support other families in that process. And Luke, he's 24. He was diagnosed in such a different time, and it's been exciting to see how the world of genetics has continued to advance and support our loved ones and our families. So I'm excited to get to share more about our, my journey, our collective journey as a group, and hopefully this resonates with other folks and siblings and loved ones in the community.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chloe. I'm so excited to be here with everyone today, especially being an international guest. I am from Hobart, Tasmania, all the way in Australia. I am big sister to Cody, who is recently turned 13, so just heading into high school years for him, big change. I have been inspired by my brother to go into disability support work, working one-on-one with those with additional needs, helping them achieve their full potential, get community access, things like that, as well as working one-on-one with students in a school setting as well. So helping them with their learning, their social, and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be here with everyone today. So excited to hear more about you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Wilner. I'm so excited to be here today and to chat a little bit about my journey and to hear from everybody else. Currently, I am in La Crosse, Wisconsin, but I am originally from Medford, Wisconsin. That is where the rest of my family is right now. I am a younger sibling to my older sister, Alyssa. She's 29 years old. And as of right now, I am currently conducting genetics research. And I guess I can start with, I was just super fascinated by how something so microscopic could alter my sister's entire brain, which was what sparked my initial curiosity with genetics. But now I am starting to kind of shift gears and want to lead more into that advocacy side of things. And excited to talk a little bit more about that later on.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be a part of this conversation. My name is Robin Bly. I am in St. Joseph, Minnesota, which is north of the Twin Cities by about an hour. And I am big sister to David, who's 29, and he actually lives in a small rural community in northwestern Minnesota. Still lives at home with my parents. And so I am currently a rural health policy planner with the state health department here in Minnesota. And while this doesn't align in the disability realm of Department of Human Services in the state enterprise, we do a lot of work around healthcare access and what it means to have all of your specialists and everything. And obviously growing up in rural Minnesota and seeing what David's needs were really impacted how much advocacy work I do, obviously as a part of the governor's enterprise level. We don't advocate, but I am able to raise awareness of all of the things, and I advocate in my personal time. So really happy to have everybody here and excited to share some information with the ASF community as a whole. So thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Megan McGath. I am a younger cousin to Ryan. I am based in New York. Ryan is based in Chicago, where I am also originally from. I'm happy to give kind of a different perspective than being a sibling. I am a genetic counselor, so kind of giving that genetics background. It's definitely become my whole world working, with Angelman syndrome. It's what I've based kind of my life around, I guess. Looking back, when I was younger and growing up, my family is very close knit. My extended family, we spend so much time together, like with my aunts, uncles, and cousins. We're like that crazy family that spends so much time together. When my partner came into my family, he's like, I just don't understand how you guys spend so much time together. It just doesn't make sense to me. So because I spend so much time with them, growing up, I remember being with my cousin and my aunt and uncle, and I kind of peripherally remember there being a struggle of an uncertain diagnosis. Like I do remember them not knowing what was going on. And at this point, my cousin is 36, turning 37. So he's a little bit older for Angelman syndrome individuals. He's on, the older side. And as genetics is changing, we learn diagnoses differently all the time, and the technology changes all the time. But for our family, it really takes a village. And my mom was a pediatric NP, and she said one thing to my aunt and uncle. She said, he really has this fascination with water. You guys should really look into getting him tested for this one thing, because prior to that, he had misdiagnoses right and left. And I don't know the exact age she had said this, but he was, if I had to guess, at least a couple of years old to maybe 10 years old. So, a long time to go without a diagnosis, and then had a lot of seizures by that point. And, that finally gave them the diagnosis. But by then, it had been a rough ride, and they had been through a lot and a lot of uncertainty. And it always kind of stuck with me, that uncertainty that they had been through, that stress, that even if I wasn't conscious of it as a child, and maybe a adolescent, it just kind of stuck with me. And I always thought about it. And then I got into high school. I took my genetics class and I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. Like, I really enjoy this topic. And I really liked the idea of medicine. And I got into college and I was like, maybe I'll go to medical school. Maybe I'll go be a geneticist. And then I decided, no, I don't want to take the MCAT. That just sounds terrible. That test seems really, really long. And then I just thought about, I think I want to be there for families like mine, for families that have gone through such a long process that is so tedious, so confusing, where they just have no idea what's going on. They're just stuck here, seeing doctor after doctor, having no answer. And I thought I came up with the job on my own, to be honest. So I thought I came up with genetic counselor on my own. And I was like, I think I want to be a genetic counselor. That sounds like the right job for me. And I went through undergrad and I was like, this is what I'm going to be. No one at my college knew what that was. Every time I told a professor, they were like, that's not a job. And I was like, no, this is a job. And so I kind of just knew that because of what my family went through, I just decided, I'm going to do this because I knew that I wanted to help families that had been through what mine had, even if I wasn't there in the moments for my aunt and uncle and my cousins who were there living it every day. Whatever I had experienced when I was with them, it kind of had just stuck with me. And I knew that I wanted to do that with my life. So here I am as a genetic counselor. And I had my first Angelman patient a few years ago, and the doctor was like, does this look like Angelman syndrome to you? She was like, I don't think it is. And I walked into the room and I took one look at him and I was like, oh, this is Angelman. Like, I recognized it immediately. I was like, oh no, this is it. So it felt really fulfilling.
We're gonna open it up. That was such a beautiful story too. Megan, you took us through how such a beautiful moment of realization and reflection on what your family was going to helped you choose your career journey. And I love that you've seen an Angelman syndrome patient because it is so characteristic once you have met someone and know someone so intimately. It just really is so identifiable. But because it's a rare disease, I mean, just finding healthcare providers and people who will advocate for you and know it as intimately as people who have family, that's hard to find. So it's so lovely that you bring that perspective. Does anyone else have anything to share about Angelman syndrome influencing your career journeys and where you are today or where you're headed in the future?
Yeah, so I would be happy to add to that. So I actually had kind of a similar experience to Megan. I had my heart set on being a genetic counselor all throughout high school and all throughout undergrad. I was actively preparing for it for multiple years. And I actually did end up going through one cycle of genetic counseling applications. I ended up not matching. I was devastated, but then it allowed me to be able to start really doing some introspection on that career. And one thing that I was able to come to terms with was that even though I have this fascination with genetics and I would love to help families, I don't know if working directly in the clinical setting was right for me. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that it wasn't. I never got a very good feeling when I was in a clinic. Always the feeling of when my sister was back in the hospital kind of came back to me. Not a place that I really enjoyed being at. So then I started brainstorming as to what are some other opportunities I could do. And then I attended the Angelman Syndrome Conference this summer in Ohio, and I was able to meet a lot of everyone involved with the Angelman Syndrome Foundation. And that sparked my curiosity as to all of the different ways I can advocate without being in that healthcare setting. And so ultimately now I am applying to graduate schools for a master's in either public health, and I'm also applying to a couple for a master's in school psychology. And just ultimately, I would love to be on that nonprofit side of things and being able to advocate for rare disease families like my own, being able to provide that outreach to families. And I guess I should have started with initially when I went into undergrad, I majored in biology, I minored in psychology, and currently I am working doing research with genetics and next generation sequencing. But I do, even though I do have a love for conducting and analyzing genetics data, my passion still stands for a career that's more like interpersonally driven. And I just really want to be able to make a change in families' lives that are similar to my own.
Can I make a plug for school psychology? You'd be really good in the school setting, I can tell you.
Well, thank you so much. I have a couple of interviews coming up here pretty soon, so I'm looking forward to that.
Maybe I can just give a little bit of perspective since I brought up the school side. So I never had a true like light bulb moment, I feel like. When I was younger, I happened to play teacher with not my brother with Angelman syndrome. It happened to be our other brother. I would when we were kids, I would like assign him homework to do and like write math problems on a whiteboard for him. So then, seeing my parents just experience with my brother growing up in the school system, there were some things they had to fight more for with IEPs and things like that. And I wasn't, at the time I was young, I wasn't heavily involved in those discussions with them, obviously at the time, but it was more just kind of like growing up with my brother, seeing him, how his school experiences were different than my school experiences, even though my parents really wanted him to go to all the same neighborhood schools. Cause again, he's the youngest of three and all the teachers knew myself and our other brother, things like that. Just kind of so like, as I got older, it was always in the back of my mind, kind of like a backup option. Like I know I would be good with something, disability related. I like teaching, probably special ed, but I went into college just trying to just kind of see if anything else I was super interested in. I ended up taking a behavioral psychology class, which then kind of helped with my transition and interest into the more behavioral side of things. But I just kind of by junior year of college just really came back to like, there's kind of nothing else that I'm super interested in. And I like didn't want to limit myself. I gave that, just kind of gave myself the breath to kind of figure it out, see if anything else sounded interesting. And then, I think kind of adding the behavior certification that I have, those classes onto my eventual master's, kind of made it a little bit more my own journey. If that was kind of a little bit more my interest in addition to the special ed side of things. And so, yeah, I think, it was just kind of always in the background, never had a true light bulb moment. And then by the end of college was just kind of like, okay, like this is like, I know I would be good at it. I'm gonna start this and just kind of, see where it goes. And it's been like 11 years and I'm still want to be in the classroom. So
I'm really glad that you brought up being in the classroom because I myself work in a classroom with students with special needs, but in a mainstream school. Rather than teaching though, I'm a teaching assistant. So really learning how to take the main classroom plan and adapt that for my students who need help. On top of that, I also do disability support work. So working one-on-one with clients and their families. When I was younger, I remember my brother having support workers in the home and they became like a part of our family. You know, they were people who would help us, you know, celebrate the wins and, you know, be there when things were tough. Like, I remember my younger brother was in the hospital in a medically induced coma around his 7th or 8th birthday, and his support worker showed up to be there for his birthday and to celebrate and spend time with him. And it was a really beautiful moment. And I really aspire to be that for other families with children with additional needs. Like Megan, I also have a participant with Angelman syndrome. She is in, I think you guys call it elementary school. For us, it's primary school. So she's a younger girl, younger than my brother and myself. And her family, with Angelman syndrome being so rare, and then with Tasmania on its own being so small, our community, as well as I assume your guys as well, is very tight-knit. So I had met this participant and her family at one of our Angelman syndrome day lunches, which was really lovely. And they were looking for someone to support her while they were at work and things. Knowing how hard and complex Angelman syndrome can be, they found out that I was doing support work, and I was really honoured when they'd reached out and asked me to support her, which is really sweet. But in terms of other students with additional needs, it's been really insightful with my brother being so complex, main diagnosis Angelman syndrome, but additionally having other things like autism and ADHD and things in that spectrum as well, has made it really not easy, but like given me a different insight into working with students with special needs and understanding them and their needs and their ways of communication and things like that. And for myself, I was able to get my position here at my current school, as my brother goes to a special education school in our state, and the manager of our support teaching staff at the time had previously been my brother's classroom teacher for 2 years. And I had volunteered there and I had done some other work there. And when she found out I was doing support work, she had offered me a role here, which was really lovely. You know, just that community sense of like knowing each other and, you know, working like that. So less so school-based and more so community. And I really appreciate and love that about our group down here.
That is so wonderful, Chloe. I think the Angelman syndrome community is so close and it really reaches across the world. I mean, we're watching people unite over International Angelman Syndrome Day all the time over different advocacy opportunities just to make sure that no one in the world or in the far expanses of where you live, you can be as remote as they come, and there's a foundation or a community of people who want to know you because your experiences are so meaningful. And I think we all want to help each other as parents, as siblings, as cousins. We all want to see not only our loved one with Angelman syndrome reach their full potential, but our individual selves reach their full potential.
Hey guys, it's Amanda here. As you know, we're here for you, our community. If you have questions about any topics we can discuss in our podcast, or if you have ideas for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. All you need to do is email me at dearamanda@angelman.org. Thank you so much for listening and your continued support of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation.
I think it's interesting that all of our participants tonight, you've lived the journey of Angelman syndrome. Now you've chosen a career that relates somewhat back to Angelman syndrome, but how do you still know who you are and find your identity and not, get swept up in the wave of what is Angelman syndrome life? Because we all know that it can come and be a force that sometimes sweeps you up, and it's hard and it's rewarding all the same. But does anyone have any tips for our listeners out there who sometimes feel swept up in the journey of Angelman syndrome and how to stay grounded and be your own true self?
I think that's such a great point, Chloe. And I think that also circles back to some of what Michelle was talking about, and like giving yourself space to navigate and explore and figure out for, your self identity, as well as like where you fit in with your identity as a sibling, a cousin, a loved one to someone with Angelman syndrome. Because I think so many of us would say, probably all of us would say, that's an intrinsic part of who we are, but it's not right the only part of who we are. So really trying to figure out and forge our own self identity. And I like how you phrased it, Chloe, of giving her like your individual selves like the ability and chance to reach that full potential, whatever that may look like. I know for myself that that's part of my journey was trying to figure out like where I wanted to land in like the disability or genetics or advocacy space. And really, honestly, those were some of the main career paths that I considered in different routes. But I definitely had moments where I thought very intentionally about, do I want to try different types of careers that don't have maybe such an inherent intrinsic link to the Angelman genetics community, just so I could make sure that I was giving myself that chance to explore. And I tried a couple of different routes and career paths along the way to becoming a genetic counselor, and all of them kind of kept leading me back to this idea of, no, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do. But for me, it was so important to make sure I felt like I was intentionally choosing that for myself, rather than that was something that I don't want to say just happened, because, right, that's not something that just happened, but like almost like, did that just happen because that's what I know? And I think, I hear that from a lot of other people in, the disability community, as well as the Angelman community, of just trying to navigate that sense of self. And it's not an easy journey, right? I would be lying if I said I felt like I was at the end of that journey. I'm still on that journey. But I think that it's been good for me to focus on being intentional. And again, where does that fit in with all of the other parts of who I am as well? So a lot of what you were saying a little bit ago, Michelle, I think really resonated in like the different routes and like things that can pull back to early childhood that definitely could have told me where my future was heading with my career path. But like, I wanted to kind of suss it out and see if that's actually where I was going.
I hear you, Sarah, on that. Like my career path was kind of windy and, being big sister, and we're about 2 years apart. I did go to a lot of medical appointments, right? Like that was just where I went. We have a couple of older siblings too, who are, my mom jokes she has a first and a second and a first and a second, David and I being the second half. But even in college, I was still going to appointments, right? And it was at a time where, before all the very fantastic Angelman clinics were established. And, we've got ours here in Minnesota at the Mayo. And so, going all over from rural Minnesota to appointments. And, I just like, I lived it. And even in school, right? Like small rural school, 300 kids in the district, like David was a really big part of my life. And how do I balance, even from a very young age, how do I balance having friends and being sister? And being one of his main caretakers while I was in high school and college, and obviously still today, not a main caretaker, but a respite provider for my family. Like, how do I find that balance? And I definitely would say that aging helped that, which was great, and therapy helps that, finding my own identity, talking to a mental health professional about who I am, what do I want to do, how do I separate myself from that, but still in a way make an impact. And so, my career journey kind of wove around with that. But, everything I do in my personal and work life, I definitely keep in mind like what's going on at home and how does that impact what's going on. And now I'm a mom to a 2.5-year-old, and really trying to figure out how does my identity now as a sister. And when I was pregnant, I bought all of these inclusive books. Like, thank goodness for all of these amazing authors, because they weren't there 20 years ago. And to see how my son, just like Uncle David, does not face him at all. And so really trying to make sure that, I am my own person. We are all our own people, but how we weave together as a family and as an Angelman syndrome community, I think it's just really beautiful.
And one thing, as you guys are kind of describing all of this, one thing that I think has helped in terms of self-identity, for me, when I've realized that when I'm at work, they don't know that or I mean, people know that I'm a sibling. Like my close coworkers, we've talked about it. They know my experience. But it's not, they see me as the teacher of the classroom, and they're just realizing that they don't know how much I hang out with my brother on the weekend or what it's like. They're just they like I kind of sometimes I not forget that I'm a sibling, but it can take a little backseat because I'm caught up with the day-to-day things at work, navigating again, students versus I feel like half of us are on this in the school setting, and then we've got a couple of you genetic counselors, so we're trying to navigate all of this. So my students, but then at the same time, it also I think really being the sibling impacts how I work with the students, how I work with the parents and build the relationships with the parents. And in terms of deciding, I mean, a huge part of special education is individualized goals. So what is an appropriate goal for this student, looking at the long term? Not to get too much into education, but just like it, so like being a sibling has definitely impacted in that sense. But then, and if parents of students or families that I'm working with ask, I have no problem mentioning it, that I am a sibling. It's definitely I think a strength, but I also try not to like volunteer it right away, because it's also a little bit of that protection. Like this is kind of my, my this is what I get to go do when I'm not at school, hang out with my brother and all of our family time and that.
Um, Off what you guys have said as well, something that I really advocate for and love doing in being a disability support worker, having that insight of being a sibling and knowing how much your sibling and, their complexities and their big personalities can wrap up the whole family and all of your lives, is being there as a support worker for the families of others with complex special needs and allowing them to have their own identities, taking some of that off of their backs. So, like, for example, I have a participant who has a few other siblings, and, mum and dad have said to me how much being there for them has allowed them to have time to do what they want to do and to have time with their other children, so that the other, their siblings do get the chance to go do extracurriculars like soccer and sports, or get to have one-on-one time with mum and dad that isn't taken up by the needs of their loved ones with extra needs. And so being able to do that for other families, knowing that I got that with disability support workers in my life, is really nice and a really great way of like being able to share the love and help others keep their own identities in the crazy world of special needs.
Chloe, I really love how you brought up the whole sibling aspect of that. Just because, I think we all can relate to this as when we were growing up and the lack of resources that there were for siblings. And that's one thing that I've become especially in tune to lately. And one thing that I really have developed quite the passion for is being able to be that change and being able to be one person to provide some of those resources that I did not have growing up, but really could have utilized. So I just wanted to say how I really appreciated how you brought that up as well.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to jump in and kind of echo what everyone has been saying, that self-identity. I have a different experience, obviously, because I do have a cousin and I wasn't living day to day, but I have that it's a little different, working in the clinic as a genetic counselor. I always wonder, do I want to devote my time to just Angelman syndrome patients? Like, is that what I want to devote my career to? Or do I want to see other genetic counseling patients because I got into this for Angelman syndrome, right? Is that what my self-identity is going to be for my career? Or is it going to be genetics as a whole? And I always think about that. And then I was also thinking about when you guys were talking about the support that you've gotten from other people from other providers as siblings. When I was going through school and I was interacting with my other students or the other students, and we were, going through classes, I always found it very interesting when we were talking, and it was very clear the other students that had no previous experience with individuals that had any type of what I would say disability or who needed extra support because they had no idea what it was like for families that needed any extra support or anything. And I was always the one to be speaking up because I know what like my aunt and uncle went through. I know what my family went through. And my classmates are probably like, this girl needs to stop talking. Like, we get it. We get it. But just like that was my identity when I was in school. Like the girl that had the cousin with Angelman. That was my identity, but I felt that it was important for me to speak up for the individuals and the families that had gone through that because these people had no idea. They were living in these bubbles and they were going to go out into the world, be genetic counselors and treat these patients but they had no idea the experiences that they were going to live through. So I really relate to, what you guys were saying, and I felt that it was just important to share that.
I think it's so true about school and healthcare that you have to speak up and you have to be an advocate. I mean, I think it's a resonating theme going on that, you know, getting a diagnosis is hard, and you're often going to a clinic and expressing the things you see and what your experiences are, and having to be that voice and sometimes being a commanding voice to get the answers. And then you get to a school district and you have to speak up and you have to say what your sibling, what your child, what your loved one needs. And I think it gets even harder in adulthood, and raising your voice even harder. And I know you guys are living through that right now. But also, I think you have to speak up for yourselves as siblings. And if anybody could share any sentiment about you have to advocate for yourself, and it's sometimes hard, and probably on your journey through your childhood to say, hey, I have needs, and this is who I am and who I want to be, and this is what I value and what's important to me, is challenging. And so, does anyone have any kind of reflections on what people and kids and teens or what parents listening need to hear to help make sure you're kind of guiding that journey, and making sure that everyone in your family unit thrives, and when they don't know how to speak up, how can you help them speak up and be advocates for themselves?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I will definitely say I was incapable of doing that. I was incapable of speaking up for my own needs until I was an adult. And so I guess anytime I come across parents with little ones or adolescents with special needs, I really just advocate for them to, like you said, pay attention to your other kiddo, find time to be with them, but also allow them to um, really explore who they are, allow them to express their needs, and maybe you have to pull it out of them a little bit. Um, and I think that this is I will always plug mental health counseling for people, and I think that that's a really great opportunity for parents to set that up for their kiddos, even young kiddos. There's so many great play therapists out there who sit down with kiddos and are able to have conversations and allow for your other kids to have some time with people who might be able to support them and build their toolbox for them to be able to express their needs. Because, like I said, I was an adult, and I don't know that I necessarily did it very well as a child. So I think that it's super important for parents to be able to recognize when your other kids may not have those tools necessary.
And just to piggyback off of that, not to focus too much on like advice for parents, because I know other siblings may be listening to this as well. But um, one thing that I have realized, or just kind of looking back, I think on my sibling journey, everything is phases. Um, in high school, there was a time when I was an athlete and ended up playing sports in college even too. And high school is such a weird time for everyone. And there was a time when I asked my parents, does he have to come to my game today? Because there was probably going to be a boy there that I liked or something. And, we handled that. I handled that with my parents at that time. But then, in college, he was at every single game and it was awesome and I loved it. And so it's just, and now that, I am a parent myself, which is so weird to think about. I have a 1-year-old. But it's, now it's this phase of navigating what that looks like. Uncle Matt and my son have a wonderful relationship. And it's been really cool to see that blossom. And so I think just, to parents, other siblings that may be listening to this, to just kind of give yourself the grace that, at this moment in life, this is how, my relationship with my sibling or my parents or things is, and it may not always be that way, and that's okay. I know that's really when you're in the moment, that's hard to kind of think about, but just everything kind of ebbs and flows and comes and goes, and just because one feeling or situation is happening right now, it's not necessarily always going to be that way.
I was totally Michelle when you were like that, give yourself grace. That's in my head. I was just saying like grace and space, like giving yourself grace, giving yourself that space and acknowledging, like you said, that there's different phases and stages along the way. I've also just been reflecting on like we all in this panel here have like a very specific set of like lived experiences, and they're certainly not reflective of like every sibling or like family member's lived experience. And I also think that there are plenty of careers and jobs and vocations that folks go into that like maybe aren't like as clearly linked to the world of Angelman syndrome or the Angelman syndrome community. But I believe for myself and in most of the interactions I've had with other siblings in the community that like the experiences and skills that you develop from being a sibling in this community are things that you can take and apply to like any job, any profession, no matter where they are. For myself, I'm like the grit, the flexibility, the willingness and ability to just totally change course. Those are all things that like I think I have honed those skills through a lot of what we've gone through as a family, right? And so I think that those are things that, again, traits, skills that can be applicable to anywhere that people want to go in life, not just any of the careers that we here in this panel today are kind of talking about and exploring or pursuing.
Going off what Sarah said and also what Michelle said, something that I love to preach to my families and people that I work with specifically, I know it's hard to hear sometimes for some people, but do not feel guilty for doing things for yourself. The best way you can support a loved one with AS or any other sort of complex needs is filling your own cup first. You can't be the best support you can for others unless you support yourself first.
I think that's so amazing. I think that like we all have unique perspectives, as you said, Sarah. And I think about like my perspective working in the public health realm, right? Like it's not directly linked to AS or working with folks with disabilities, but it's looking at access to care, it's looking at transportation and all of those other really important social determinants of health that's a whole nother level that our family members are living with. And, living in a rural area, like just advocating. I think about advocating for you see a new physician or a new person at your small town clinic and they've never seen Angelman syndrome. Like they probably haven't seen many rare diseases. And what does that look like? And how do we all weave our stories together and continue to advocate for our families. And I think about working in public health, and I've worked with, I've been a support planner for families in consumer-directed community supports and worked as a fiscal support worker for paying waiver payments out and just kind of that back end support role. I think that a lot of us have this like servant mindset for our families, for the communities that we serve. And like you said, Sarah, like it might not be directly related to being a teacher or being a genetic counselor, but it could be like you're just that customer support worker in whatever job that is that our family members have really just taught us how to like stop and consider what everybody's unique intersectional identity is and how we can really just recognize that and recognize that we don't always know what the person on the other side is going through. And I just, whatever career folks who might be thinking about careers, I think about you, Haley, or thinking about making a transition in their career, or they're a 15-year-old, you might not know. I didn't know. I don't think I knew what I wanted to do until I got my current job. Even though you don't know, you have all of these really cool tools that you don't learn in a classroom or you don't learn at a job setting. You don't learn in all of these different ways, but you learn that from your family member. And how cool is that, that you're able to have this identity and this passion for life and for others. I mean, I've never met another sibling who is like, yeah, no, I don't care about people, right? Like that is who we are. And so I feel really honored to have had this like resonance with you all, and I hope with others listening to the podcast today.
I think you all so beautifully shared how much your personality traits, how much your lived experience, how much your just interactions with the community have shaped you and made you wonderful people. And you obviously give so much back to your communities. And I think, there's so many areas in this world where we can just go out, do good, and care about the person and see the person for their individual self. And a lot of times that's the beauty of Angelman syndrome. Nobody here has a family member who's like the other one. You're all living something very unique, and you all have made an uniquely beautiful impact in your community. And I'm so sometimes grateful that Angelman syndrome is in my life. And I think probably a lot of people feel that way too, but it takes you time to get there. I mean, a lot of newly diagnosed families are in the trenches and grieving because their future is definitely not what they think it will be. But from everything everybody has said, I feel like newly diagnosed families are families who have other children and are wondering how to shape them into being good humans, and who are maybe thinking of expanding their families, or who are looking back at their life and saying, I have these adult children out there in society. Did I do it right? I think hearing from you all, we know that because of Angelman syndrome, I think everyone's raising pretty good humans because you've adapted, you've shown your grit, you've been resilient, all the adjectives the ASF likes to use out there. We're Angelman strong. That's our theme right now. So I think you guys are awesome. I thank you so much for being here, for sharing what Angelman syndrome has meant in your life, and it has made a profound impact. And I just hope that we continue to have these conversations because they're important. I think the best thing we did here tonight was bring community together, because rare disease is isolating and you can't do it alone, and you have to be able to bounce it off as someone who knows what you're going through and what you've been through and what you'll continue to go through. Look, everybody's at a different chapter here tonight. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for joining me, and we hope you'll listen again.
Thanks for listening to the ASF podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support us, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or review. And please don't forget to subscribe.